The wind howled across the frozen plains of Arcana, a planet where nights lasted weeks and the cold could swallow even the strongest life. In the middle of the storm, a small alien child stumbled through the snow, her skin turning from pale violet to a dangerous shade of blue. Her tiny hands trembled, her breath came out in sharp clouds, and her eyes filled with fear. She was lost, and the cold was stealing her life. Far above, in a battered cargo ship, a human named Daniel sat scanning the surface. He was a wanderer, a trader who had seen too many battles and too many worlds. He had no reason to land here, no reason to care for this icy wasteland. Yet something flickered on his scanner, faint heat signature. Weak and fading, most would ignore it, thinking it just an animal. But Daniel paused. Something about the fragile pattern pulled at him. He muttered to himself, "That's no beast. That's someone dying." Without thinking twice, he dropped. His ship through the storm, the landing shook the ice. His boots crunched as he stepped out. The wind bit through his jacket, but he pressed on, guided by the scanner. He found her small, fragile, almost buried in the snow. Her lips trembled. Her chest barely moved. Her alien body was different from humans. Yet Daniel recognized the universal sign of a child close to death. He knelt, scooping her into his arms. Her body was icy, and his warmth made her twitch weakly. Daniel wrapped his coat around her and whispered, "Hold on, kid, I've got you." Her eyes opened just a little, glowing faintly in the darkness. She tried to speak, but only a weak sound came, like broken glass. Daniel rushed her back to his ship, sealing the hatch and blasting the heaters. The ship hummed, filling with warmth. He laid her on the bunk. Wrapping her in thermal blankets, he fumbled through his medkit, cursing under his breath. Come on, don't you die on me for long minutes." Nothing happened. Her small chest rose only faintly. Her skin was still blue. The storm outside roared. But inside the ship, there was only silence and the beating of Daniel's anxious heart. Then finally, her chest rose deeper, stronger. Her skin shifted from blue to pale lavender. She coughed, weak but alive. Daniel let out a long breath, leaning back in relief. He looked at her carefully. "You're safe now," he whispered. But he knew this was only the beginning. A child alone in the frozen wild. Where were her people? Why had she been left to die? Questions burned in his mind. The girl's glowing eyes opened again, this time wider. She studied him with a strange mix of fear and wonder. Her voice, soft and fragile, whispered one word, something in her alien tongue. Daniel didn't understand, but the meaning was clear enough. Gratitude. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside that ship, a fragile spark of trust began to grow between a human wanderer and a child from another world. Neither of them knew it. But this single act of compassion would change both their fates forever. And in the shadows of the icy wasteland, something else was watching, waiting for the human who dared to interfere. The alien child lay bundled in the blankets, her tiny body still trembling. Daniel watched over her like a hawk, his hands restless, tapping on the armrest of the chair beside the bunk. He wasn't used to this. Saving lives wasn't in his usual line of work. He carried cargo, traded goods, sometimes even ran from pirates. But this was different. The ship's heater roared, pushing back the frozen air. Steam curled from the girl's lips as she breathed more evenly. Daniel leaned forward, studying her features. Her skin was smooth and lavender now, not blue anymore. Her eyes flickered open, glowing faint gold in the dim cabin. They were large, almost too large for her face, filled with fear but also curiosity. She tried to speak again. Her voice cracked like thin ice. Daniel frowned, shaking his head. "Easy, kid. Don't strain yourself." He reached for the medkit again, pulling out a nutrient injector. He had no idea if her species could even handle human supplies. It was a gamble, but he couldn't just sit and watch her fade. "All right," he muttered. Loading the injector. "Hope this doesn't kill you." He pressed the small device to her arm. A soft hiss escaped. The girl flinched, her eyes widening. For a moment, Daniel's heart stopped. Then, slowly, her color brightened. Her chest lifted with stronger breaths. Her eyes fluttered, then fixed on him again, sharper this time. She whispered something again, but this time Daniel caught a word. "Human." The sound was broken, uncertain but clear. Daniel blinked. You know what I am?" She nodded weakly, her lips trembled as she tried to say more. But her voice failed her. She sank back against the pillow. Exhausted, Daniel rubbed his forehead. He knew now that this wasn't some random accident. This girl knew what humans were. Maybe her people had seen humans before. Maybe worse, they had reasons to fear them. The ship rocked slightly as the storm outside pounded against the hull. Daniel adjusted the stabilizers, his mind racing. He had picked her up, saved her life. But what next? If her people were near, they might see him as a kidnapper. If they weren't, then why was a child alone in such a deadly place? The girl stirred again. Her small hand slipped from under the blanket. Reaching toward him, Daniel hesitated, then took her hand gently. It was cold, but her grip was surprisingly strong for someone so weak. Her glowing eyes softened. For the first time since he'd found her, Daniel felt she trusted him. Even if just a little. "All right, kid," he whispered. "I'll keep you safe. That's a promise." But promises on alien worlds were dangerous things. He knew that. He had seen men killed for less hours past. The storm finally began to ease. Daniel decided to leave the icy plains behind. He guided the ship upward, engines roaring as they broke through the clouds. From orbit, Arconas frozen. Beauty stretched below, endless fields of ice glistening under the faint sun. The girl gasped softly, pressing her small face to the window. Her glowing eyes widened in awe as she saw her world from above. She whispered something Daniel couldn't understand, but the tone was full of wonder. For a brief moment, despite the danger, Daniel smiled. Then his console beeped sharply. A proximity alert flashed red across the screen. Daniel cursed under his breath. No, not now. He scanned the radar, several signals closing in. Small but fast, they weren't natural. They were ships. The girl stiffened, her small hands clutching the blanket. Her eyes widened in terror. She began shaking her head violently. Whispering the same word again and again, Daniel couldn't understand it. But the fear in her voice told him enough. Whoever was coming wasn't friendly. Daniel's jaw tightened. He had stumbled into something bigger than a rescue. Whoever these ships were, they wanted this child, wanted her dead. The first blip drew close. The human's hands danced across the console, preparing the ship for evasive maneuvers. His old freighter wasn't built for combat, but Daniel had been. In enough fights to know how to keep himself alive, the girl reached for him again. Her eyes glowing brighter now, almost pleading. Her voice cracked out one word in a language that finally made sense to him. "Help." Daniel glanced at her, then back at the flashing radar. He muttered to himself, "Kid, you don't need to ask. You've already got it." Outside, the stars burned cold and distant. The enemy ships closed in, and Daniel tightened his grip on the controls. The fight was about to begin. The radar screamed louder as the enemy ships drew closer. Daniel's freighter shook under the sudden strain. Old metal groaning as the engines pushed to maximum, he cursed under his breath. Come on, hold together, old girl. His ship was built for hauling cargo, not outrunning hunters, but he had no choice. The alien child clutched the blanket, her glowing eyes wide. She kept whispering that same word in her language, fear shaking her voice. Daniel glanced back at her, then back at the console. His jaw tightened. He had been in dangerous skies before, but this time it wasn't just his life at stake. The first enemy ship burst into view, sleek, black craft. Shaped like a blade, its lights cut through the darkness like the eyes of a predator. It moved with deadly precision, circling closer. Daniel threw his freighter into a sharp roll, the engines howling. The child yelped as the ship lurched. Nearly tumbling off the bunk, Daniel steadied her with one hand while steering with the other. "Stay down, kid," he muttered. "I'll get us out of this." A flash lit the skyline of the ships fired. A searing beam of plasma cut across the void, grazing Daniel's hull. Metal screeched, alarms blared. Daniel gritted his teeth. They're not playing games. He slammed a switch, releasing a burst of counterflares. The glowing orbs of light scattered behind the freighter, confusing the enemy sensors. For a moment, the hunters pulled back, circling, waiting. Daniel took the chance to dive toward a thick cluster of ice asteroids drifting near Arcona's orbit. The child gasped, watching the massive chunks of frozen rock loom closer. Daniel guided the freighter into the field. Weaving between jagged spires of ice, each turn was tight, each movement dangerous. The hull scraped against sharp surfaces, sparks flying inside the cabin. But the enemy ships hesitated to follow, afraid of crashing. Daniel allowed himself a short breath of relief. That'll slow them down, but he knew it wouldn't last. These hunters were professionals, and they wanted the girl badly enough. To risk anything, the child crawled closer, gripping his arm. Her small voice whispered again. This time, trembling less, "Who meant they?" "Take me." Daniel froze, staring down at her. She was trying to explain, to warn him, with broken words. She managed more. "They kill my people. Take children." Her glowing eyes filled with tears. Daniel's chest tightened. So that was it. These weren't just random pursuers. They were slavers, predators who hunted her kind. And somehow she had escaped. That's why she had been alone in the frozen wasteland. Daniel clenched his fists on the controls, rage burning in his chest. He had seen slavers before. He hated them. The radar flashed again. Enemy ships reappeared. Slipping carefully into the ice field, Daniel cursed. Persistent bastards. He pushed the engines harder, weaving deeper into the deadly maze. The child held onto him tightly, trusting him even as the ship shook with every narrow escape. Then, a loud crack split the air. One of the asteroids clipped the hull, throwing the freighter sideways. Warning lights lit up across the console. Daniel fought to steady the ship. The girl cried out, tumbling into his lap. He caught her, pulling her close. "I've got you. Don't let go," he said firmly. But the hunters were closer now. Their sleek ships darted through the asteroid field like wolves chasing prey. Another beam lanced past, exploding a chunk of ice into fragments. The shockwave rattled Daniel's freighter, his teeth clenched. "If I don't do something fast, we're finished." His eyes darted to a cluster of massive asteroids ahead. Among them was one hollowed out. It's a dark cavern opening wide like a mouth. It was dangerous, but it was his only chance. Daniel angled the freighter and dove into the cavern. The engines screamed. Sparks flew. The child buried her face against his chest, whispering, "Please, please." Inside the cavern, darkness swallowed them. Daniel shut off the ship's lights. Relying only on scanners, the freighter drifted slowly, silent. Heartbeat loud in Daniel's ears. Outside, the hunters prowled, scanning, searching. Their lights passed over the entrance. But they didn't see him slip inside. For long moments, silence ruled. The only sound was the faint hum of the freighter and the child's soft breaths. Daniel held still, barely daring to breathe himself. If they found him, there would be no escape. Finally, the radar dimmed. The signals drifted away. The hunters moved on. Daniel exhaled heavily. Leaning back, he whispered, "That was too close." The child looked up at him. Her glowing eyes filled with tears. She pressed her forehead to his arm, whispering, "Safe." With human, Daniel froze, her words striking deep. He had saved people before, but never had someone said it with such fragile trust. But deep inside, he knew this wasn't over. If they were willing to chase her this far, they wouldn't stop. The girl wasn't just some lost child. She was important enough for killers to hunt across frozen worlds. And now, by saving her, Daniel had painted a target on himself too. Outside, the cavern walls groaned as ice shifted shadows danced in the darkness. Daniel tightened his grip on the controls. The fight was only beginning. The cavern was cold and silent. Daniel kept the ship's engines low, only enough power to hold position. He didn't dare make a sound louder than a whisper. The alien child sat curled in his seat, her glowing eyes fixed on him. She seemed calmer now, but her small hands still shook. Daniel leaned back, rubbing his forehead. "What have I gotten myself into?" he muttered. He looked at the girl. "Who are you, kid? And why are those hunters after you?" She tilted her head, not fully understanding, but slowly. She tried to speak. Her voice was soft, broken, but her words carried weight. "Name." "Liara," she whispered, her hand pressed against her chest. Daniel nodded. "Liara?" The name felt strange on his tongue, yet powerful. She pointed upward, out into the stars, her eyes filled with sadness. "My people. Taken. Children. Stolen. Parents dead." Daniel's stomach tightened. He had guessed slavers, but hearing it confirmed was worse. He remembered too many colonies where chains were tighter than laws. He clenched his fists. "And you escaped." Liara nodded. Weakly, a tear slipped from her glowing eye. She whispered again, "They come. Every season. Take more." Her small frame shook as she remembered. Daniel's jaw hardened. He felt anger rising like fire. Slavers didn't just break bodies. They broke hope. They left scars that never healed. And now this child had seen more than any child should. For a long moment, Daniel said nothing. He only sat in silence, staring at the console. His past had been full of selfish choices, trading, running, surviving. He had sworn never to get involved, never to fight someone else's battles. But now, looking at Liara, he felt the weight of her fragile trust pressing against his chest. The ship creaked as ice shifted around them. Daniel snapped out of his thoughts. He knew they couldn't hide forever. The hunters would return. He needed a plan. He turned to Liara. "If they're after you, they won't stop. So we need to get somewhere safe." Liara's glowing eyes widened. "Safe? No safe," she whispered. Daniel shook his head. "There has to be." He thought quickly, scanning his memory of the sector. There was a station 2 jumps away, run by an old friend, Captain Reyes. A rough man, but loyal, if anyone could give them shelter, it was him. Daniel set coordinates into the console. The engines hummed, low at first, then louder as the freighter pulled from the cavern. Liara gripped the seat tightly, watching the darkness with fear. Daniel glanced at her. "Don't worry, kid, we'll make it." But as the freighter slipped free of the ice field, the radar screamed again. Red blips lit up across the screen. The hunters were back, and this time, there were more. Daniel cursed. They brought reinforcements. The enemy ships formed a net, circling, closing in, sleek and black. Their weapons glowed with deadly intent. Liara whimpered, clutching Daniel's sleeve. Her whole body trembled. Daniel gritted his teeth. "No running this time," he muttered. He slammed a switch. Shields roared to life. Weapons hummed. Weak, but still functional. The freighter wasn't built for war. But Daniel had made modifications over the years. He wasn't helpless. "All right, kid," he said firmly. "We're gonna fight." The first blast hit the shields, shaking the ship. Sparks rained from the ceiling. Daniel growled. "Hold together, damn it!" He returned fire, twin cannons flashing. The shots weren't powerful, but they struck one of the hunters, sending it spinning into an asteroid. Liara gasped, eyes wide. She had never seen resistance. Never seen someone stand against the hunters. For her, humans had been a story distant. Unknown, yet here was one human. Defying the predators who had destroyed her people, another blast struck, rocking the freighter. Daniel held the controls steady. Sweat trickled down his forehead. He was outnumbered, outgunned. But his heart burned with defiance. He wouldn't give this child back. Not now, not ever. Lyra's eyes glowed brighter. She pressed her small hands together, whispering words Daniel couldn't understand. Suddenly, the air in the cabin shimmered. For a brief moment, Daniel thought he was hallucinating. But no, it was real. The child was glowing, her body radiating faint energy. The ship's systems flickered, then surged, lights brightened, engines roared with sudden power. Daniel's eyes widened. "What the kid? What are you doing?" Lyra's voice was soft, trembling. "Help. Human." Safe, the freighter lunged forward, faster than it had ever moved before. Daniel seized the chance, weaving through the enemy net. Plasma bolts chased them, but the boosted engines carried them out of range. The hunters scrambled, but they couldn't keep up. Minutes later, silence returned, the radar cleared. Daniel slumped back in his chair, breathing hard. He looked at Liara in shock. Her glow faded, leaving her exhausted. She collapsed against him, whispering faintly, "Safe. With you." Before her eyes closed, Daniel held her gently, his mind spinning. This was no ordinary child. She had power, something hidden, something the hunters wanted, and now he was caught in the storm of it. He looked out at the star's jaw. "Tight. All right, kid," he whispered. "I'll keep you alive. Whatever it takes." But deep inside, Daniel knew this was no longer just about survival. This was a war, and it had only just begun. The freighter limped through space, its hull scarred, its systems flickering. Daniel kept one hand steady on the controls, the other resting lightly on the blanket that covered Liara. The child was asleep now, her small chest rising and falling. Slowly, exhaustion had taken her after the strange burst of power. Daniel stared at her in silence. His mind churned. What had she done back there? How could a child radiate that kind of energy? He shook his head, whispering under his breath, "You're not just any kid, are you?" The nav system beeped softly. They were close to their destination, Rhea Station. It wasn't much, just a patched-up trading post, drifting near the edge of the sector. But for Daniel, it meant a chance to breathe, maybe even find answers. As the station came into view, Liara stirred. Her glowing eyes fluttered open. She sat up weakly, peering out the window. The massive shape of the station reflected in her gaze. She tilted her head, whispering, "Safe." Daniel gave a tired chuckle. "Safer than where we've been, at least." He guided the freighter into the docking bay. Metal clamps locked onto the hull. The ship hissed as air rushed into the chamber. Daniel powered down the engines, standing slowly. His muscles ached, but his spirit burned with determination. He glanced at Liara. "Stay close, kid." The airlock opened with a groan. The scent of oil and iron filled the corridor. The station was alive with noise voices shouting, machines grinding, traders haggling. Daniel stepped out with Liara at his side. Curious eyes followed them. Humans were rare here. And the child at his side drew even more stares. A tall man in a patched uniform approached. His beard streaked with gray. His voice was rough, but warm. "Daniel, you old bastard. I thought you died years ago." Daniel smirked faintly. "Not yet, Reyes." Captain Reyes clasped his arm, then looked down at Liara. His eyes narrowed. "And who's this?" Daniel hesitated. "She's someone who needs help," Rhea studied the child carefully, then sighed. "You've always had a way of finding trouble, Daniel. Come on, let's talk somewhere private." They entered a dim back room, walls lined with screens and maps. Rhea poured a drink. Daniel refused, sitting with Liara on his lap. She looked small, fragile. Out of place in the rough station, Daniel explained what had happened the frozen wasteland. The hunters, the fight, the glow. Reyes listened silently, his expression growing darker. When Daniel finished, Reyes leaned back. "You're in deep, friend, deeper than you realize. The ones after her, they're called the Draxus slavers, killers, worse than any pirates you've met. They've been hunting her people for years." Liara shivered at the name, pressing against Daniel's chest. Daniel frowned. "Why? What do they want with her kind?" Reyes lowered his voice. "Power. Her people aren't ordinary. Their bodies carry energy unlike anything else. The Draxus harvest it, weaponize it. That glow you sit's real, and it's why they'll never stop hunting her." Daniel's stomach twisted. He looked at Liara. Her innocent eyes blinked up at him. She didn't understand all the words, but she understood enough fear flickered in her gaze. Daniel tightened his arms around her. "Then they'll have to go through me," he said firmly. Rhea sighed. Rubbing his forehead, "You don't get it. Daniel, the Draxus aren't just hunters. They're an empire. If you keep her, you'll have the whole sector on your back. You can't win." Daniel leaned forward, his eyes hard. "I'm not giving her up, Reyes. Not to them. Not to anyone." Liara gripped his sleeve tightly, as if afraid he'd change his mind. Her soft whisper broke the silence. "Stay." With human, Reyes stared at him for a long moment, then laughed bitterly. "You haven't changed. Always running headfirst into fires you can't put out. Fine, I'll help you. But you'd better be ready to fight." Daniel nodded. "I've been ready since the day I picked her up from the snow." Suddenly, alarms blared across the station. Red lights flashed. Voices shouted in panic. Reyes cursed, rushing to the console. "Damn it, they've tracked you. The Draxus are here." Daniel's blood ran cold. He scooped Liara into his arms. She clung to him, trembling. "How fast?" Daniel asked. Reyes slammed keys on the console. "Too fast. They're already docking." The room shook as explosions echoed through the station. The Draxus weren't knocking politely. They were tearing their way in. Daniel's heart pounded. He turned to Reyes. "Where's the safest way out?" Reyes grimaced. "There is no safe way. But if you reach the lower hangar, there's an old smuggler's ship. It might still fly." Daniel tightened his grip on Liara. He looked at Reyes. "Come with us." Reyes shook his head. "This is my station. My people, I'll hold them. Off. You get her out." Lyra's eyes widened, glowing bright with fear and sorrow. She reached toward Reyes, whispering something in her tongue. Daniel swallowed hard. He knew what had to be done. He nodded once, firmly. "Don't die, Reyes." The captain smirked faintly. "Someone's got to keep your legend alive. Now go." Daniel ran through the corridors, alarms blaring, station walls shaking with every explosion. Behind him, the Draxus stormed in, dark figures with glowing weapons. Their voices echoed like growls. They were coming fast. Liara buried her face in his chest, whispering the same word again and again. "Safe. Safe. Safe." Daniel's breath burned in his lungs. His legs pushed harder. He swore to himself he would get her out, no matter the cost. The lower hangar doors came into sight, metal groaning, sparks flying. Ahead waited the smugglers. Ship battered but intact, Daniel's only hope. He charged forward, knowing that behind them, death was closing in. The hangar shook as Daniel burst inside, Liara clinging to him. Sirens wailed. Red lights flashed across the walls. Smoke hissed from broken pipes. The air smelled of burning metal and fear. At the far end of the hangar sat the smuggler's ship. Old and scarred, its hull patched with uneven plates, it looked like it had no right to fly. But to Daniel, it was a miracle. He raced across the floor. Footsteps pounding. Behind him, the sound of boots echoed. The Draxus had found the hangar. 2. Their voices growled in their alien tongue, harsh and sharp like blades. Daniel ducked as plasma bolts streaked past. Explosions tearing into crates and fuel canisters. Liara whimpered, burying her face against his chest. He pressed her closer. "Don't look, kid. Just hold on." He reached the ship's ramp, slamming the emergency release. The ramp groaned open. Daniel sprinted inside, kicking the controls to seal it behind him. The Draxus shouted, firing again, but the door slammed shut, sparks bouncing across the floor. Daniel set Liara into the co-pilot's chair. Her glowing eyes were wide, frightened but determined. "Strap in," he told her quickly. She fumbled with the belts, but her small hands worked fast. Daniel leapt to the pilot's seat, fingers flying over controls. The ship coughed as engines roared to life, shaking like an old beast waking from sleep. Daniel gritted his teeth. "Come on, don't quit on me now." Lights flickered, systems groaned. And then the engine screamed. The ship lifted, shuddering. The hangar doors ahead were sealed tight. Daniel slammed a switch. Guns mounted on the old ship fired. The blasts ripped into the doors, metal bending and sparking. Draxus soldiers poured into the hangar, firing wildly. Bolts slammed into the ship's shields. The hull rattled. Liara gasped, pointing at them. Her eyes glowed faintly again. Daniel felt the ship's power surge. The engines flared brighter. He didn't question it. He just slammed the throttle. The ship burst forward like a bullet, crashing through the broken hangar doors into open space. For one brief second, Daniel breathed. But then the radar screamed. Draxus warships surrounded the station, dozens of them. Sleek black blades cutting through the stars. Liara whimpered. No escape. Daniel's jaw tightened. There's always an escape. The Draxus ships moved in formation, weapons glowing. They wanted Liara alive. Daniel realized. Or else. They would have destroyed him already. That gave him one small advantage. He swerved hard. The old ship tumbling between enemy fire, bolts scorched past them, close enough to shake the hull. He punched coordinates into the nav system. "We need a jump now." But the ship's drive groaned. Too old, too damaged. The system blinked red. Charging too slow, the Draxus closed in. Tightening their net, Daniel cursed under his breath. Sweat dripped down his face. He fired the ship's cannons, weak blasts flashing across the void. One Draxus ship spun away, smoking. But 10 more pressed in. Liara placed her small hands on the console. Her eyes glowed brighter. Her voice whispered like a prayer. Daniel didn't understand the words, but the ship did. The lights flared. The engines surged. The jump drive began to charge faster. Daniel's eyes widened. "Kid, whatever you're doing, keep doing it." But the Draxus weren't blind. There comes hissed with static, a deep voice growling across the channel. Daniel didn't understand the language. T understood the tone. It was rage. The largest Draxus ship broke formation, moving directly toward them. Its size dwarfed Daniel's ship. Weapons glowed like suns. If it fired, they'd be gone in seconds. Daniel's fingers tightened on the controls. He whispered, "Not yet. I'm not letting you take her." He pulled the ship into a sharp dive, skimming the edges of the station debris. Drax's fire followed, explosions tearing apart broken metal. The jump drive screamed. Nearly ready, Lyra's glow spread across her small body. Sweat running down her forehead. Her voice grew louder, as if she was pouring everything she had into the ship. Daniel glanced at her. "Hang on, kid. Almost." Then the Draxus ship fired. A massive blast of energy surged toward them. Daniel yanked the controls. The beam grazed the ship's side. Alarms shrieked, panels exploded, fire licked across the wall. Daniel threw his body over Liara. Shielding her as sparks rained, the drive beeped green. Ready? Daniel slammed the lever. The ship tore forward. Stars stretched into lines. The Draxus ships vanished behind them. Silence filled the cabin, broken only by Daniel's ragged breathing. The fire died out. Systems flickered weakly. He turned to Liara. She was slumped in her chair, eyes half closed, her glow fading. She looked utterly drained. Daniel unbuckled and caught her gently. Pulling her against his chest, her weak voice whispered, "Safe." With human, then she went limp, asleep. Daniel held her close, staring out into the endless void. He whispered fiercely, "I'll protect you, kid, no matter what." But in the back of his mind, one truth burned. The Draxus weren't finished. They would chase him across every star, and next time, they might bring a fleet no escape could outrun. For now, though, they had survived, and that meant there was still hope. The jump ended with a violent jolt. Daniel's ship dropped back into normal space. Alarms still flashing, systems flickered weakly. Warning lights glowing red, outside. The stars shimmered against a quiet stretch of void. For now, there were no Draxus ships in sight. Daniel leaned back, breathing hard. Liara lay against him. Her small frame still limp. Her glow had faded completely. She looked like any ordinary child now. Fragile and exhausted, Daniel brushed a hand over her hair, whispering, "You did good. Kid, you saved us." The ship drifted slowly, too damaged for another jump. Daniel checked the scanners, searching for anything a planet, a station, somewhere. To land finally, the screen pinged. A small green world appeared at the edge of the system, rich with forests and oceans. Daniel smiled faintly. That'll do. As the freighter limped toward the planet, Liara stirred. Her glowing eyes blinked. "Open weakly," she whispered. "Human? Safe." Daniel nodded. "Yeah, for now." But he knew the truth. The Draxus weren't gone. They were regrouping, hunting. They would never stop. The ship broke through the planet's atmosphere. Shaking violently, Daniel fought the controls. Guiding it down, the freighter crashed into a dense forest clearing. Metal screamed, trees snapped, finally. The ship slid to a halt, smoke hissing from its sides. Daniel unstrapped, lifting Liara into his arms. He stepped out into the cool air. The forest stretched endlessly, birds shrieking, leaves glowing faintly under the twin moons. For the first time in days, the world felt alive, peaceful. Liara raised her head, breathing in deeply. Her eyes widened at the sight of green life. "Beautiful," she whispered. Daniel chuckled softly. "Yeah, beats frozen wastelands." They made a small camp by the wreck. Daniel repaired what systems he could. He cooked a simple meal. Liara ate hungrily, her strength returning. Yet her eyes were troubled. She looked at him with a weight far beyond her years. Finally, she spoke, "Human. They never stop Draxus. Follow forever." Daniel nodded grimly. "I know." He poked at the fire, "but we'll keep running. Keep fighting, as long as it takes." Liara shook her head slowly. Her small hand touched his chest. Her eyes glowed faintly again. "Not run. Fight." Daniel froze. "What do you mean?" Her voice trembled, but her words were clear. "My people gave me gift, power. Inside, Draxus wanted. But if I share with human, maybe." Strong enough. Daniel stared at her, shocked. He realized then why the Draxus hunted her so desperately. She wasn't just a child. She was the key to something greater, a living source of energy, a weapon or a hope. He hesitated. Shaking his head, "Kid, That sounds dangerous. You'll burn yourself out. But Liara only looked at him, her eyes glowing brighter. Better than hide forever, better than chains. Daniel's chest tightened. He had always lived for himself, never believing in causes. But now, with this child in his arms, he felt something he hadn't in years. Purpose. He nodded slowly. All right, Liara, we fight. The forest trembled with a sudden rumble. The sky above lit with streaks of fire. Daniel's heart sank. Draxus dropships. They had found them. Liara clutched his sleeve. But this time, there was no fear in her eyes. Only determination. Daniel grabbed his rifle. Standing tall, he looked at her. Stay behind me. But Liara shook her head. She raised her small hands. Energy crackling faintly around her fingers. Daniel's eyes widened. You sure about this? She nodded. Together, the trees split as Drax's soldiers marched into the clearing. Their armor glowed, weapons raised. The commander stepped forward, his voice like thunder. Daniel didn't understand the words, but the meaning was clear. They demanded Liara. Daniel raised his rifle. She's not yours, the Draxus roared. Charging, the battle erupted. Blasts lit the night. Daniel fired. Dropping soldier after soldier, his old skills sharp. His body moved with fury. Liara stood beside him, her small frame glowing brighter and brighter. Energy rippled from her like a shield, deflecting blasts, throwing enemies back. The Draxus pressed harder, wave after wave. Daniel's rifle overheated. He pulled a blade. Fighting hand to hand, sparks flew as steel clashed with alien weapons. Liara cried out, releasing a surge of light that shook the ground. Several Draxus fell, their armor shattering. Daniel looked at her in awe. Kid, you're incredible. She smiled faintly, though tears ran down her cheeks. With human, she whispered. Always strong. The commander roared, charging them, his weapon raised high. Daniel braced. But Liara stepped forward. Her glow flared into a blinding light. She shouted in her tongue, power bursting outward. The commander was thrown back. His armor cracking, he hit the ground and didn't rise. The remaining Draxus faltered. Fear rippled through them. They turned, retreating into the trees. Daniel stood, panting, his body aching. He lowered his blade. Staring at the battlefield lit by moonlight, Liara collapsed into his arms. Her glow fading, he held her tightly, whispering, You did it, kid. We did it. She smiled weakly, safe. With human, then she closed her eyes, resting. Daniel looked out at the quiet forest. He knew the war wasn't over. The Draxus would come again. But now, he wasn't just a wanderer. He was a protector. And Liara wasn't just a child. She was hope. He lifted her carefully, looking at the stars beyond the treetops. His voice was low but fierce. Let them come. We'll be ready. And for the first time, Daniel didn't feel like he was running anymore. He felt like he was standing where he was meant to be, with a new purpose, with a new family. Together, they would face whatever came. Asterisk.